She didn't lose it all at once. That's the part nobody talks about. There was no single moment of weakness, no sudden lapse in judgment. There was just a Tuesday afternoon, a quiet house, and a message from someone who seemed to understand her in a way nobody had in years. The first transfer was $200. She remembers thinking, "This is nothing. This is less than a car repair. This is less than a dental visit." And that thought, that small, quiet rationalization, was the door opening. Her name was Patricia. She was 61 years old, and she lived alone in a 2-bedroom house in the same town where she'd raised her children. Her husband had died 4 years earlier. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. He just got smaller and quieter, and then one morning he was gone. Lung cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the end. After that, the house stayed exactly the same. His reading glasses were still on the nightstand for the first 8 months. She moved them eventually, not because she was ready, but because her daughter came to visit and she didn't want anyone to see. She worked 3 days a week at a dental office, scheduling appointments, managing records, occasionally answering phones. She had done this for 19 years. The work was repetitive and she found it calming, a predictable place to be on days when the house felt too still. Her finances were steady, not comfortable, but steady. She had $38,400 in a savings account, money accumulated slowly over decades, a little set aside after every paycheck, the kind of savings that feels almost sacred because it took so long to build. She had a modest pension from her husband's union, and Social Security that covered most of her fixed expenses. She wasn't wealthy, but she was safe. She had not been on a date since 1987. She had not held someone's hand since the last week of her husband's life. She didn't think of herself as lonely. She thought of herself as someone who had learned to be alone, which she believed was different. She had coffee with her neighbor on Saturdays. She called her daughter on Sundays. She watched British procedurals in the evening and went to bed by 10. That was her life. And most of the time she was fine. Her granddaughter set up the profile. It was a Sunday visit in late September, and her granddaughter, 23, patient, cheerful, had sat next to her at the kitchen table with a laptop and said, "Grandma, you should just try it. You don't have to do anything. You just make a profile." Patricia had resisted for an hour. Then she had let her. The photo they used was from a birthday 2 summers ago. She was smiling and her hair looked nice. Her granddaughter chose the username, wrote a short bio, and said, "Just see who messages you. You don't have to respond to anyone." Patricia left the app closed for 6 days. Then one evening, after the procedural ended and the house was very quiet, she opened it. There were 3 messages waiting. 2 were from men whose profile photos made her uncomfortable. She didn't respond to those. The 3rd was from someone named Daniel. His first message was, "I noticed you mentioned you like quiet mornings. That's a rare thing to value these days." She read it twice, and then, after a moment, she wrote back. Daniel said he was 64 and recently retired. He'd spent most of his career as a civil engineer working on infrastructure projects, bridges mostly, and had relocated a few years ago after his own wife passed. He was living outside of Seattle now, he said, which explained the time difference when he sometimes messaged late. He had a son in Portland who he was close to. He liked to cook, specifically Italian food. He had a small dog named Ro. He sent a photo of Ro on the 3rd day. Patricia found herself smiling at it before she even realized she was smiling. Their conversations were slow at first. A few messages a day, then more. He remembered details, that her daughter lived in Phoenix, that she preferred tea to coffee, that she found her job calming in a way that she found hard to explain to people. He said, "I understand that. There's something good about a rhythm you trust." She wrote that line down in a notebook. She didn't know why. She just did. 3 weeks in, they started talking on the phone. His voice was measured and warm. He laughed at the right moments. He asked questions and then actually listened to the answers. He told her things about missing his wife, about the specific loneliness of being an older man in a new city, about how he had almost not made a profile at all because he felt ridiculous doing it. I felt the same way, she told him. I know, he said. That's why I wrote to you. And now, looking back, she knows exactly when it started. It was the 5th week. He had mentioned, almost in passing, that he was dealing with a complicated situation involving an overseas project, old contract work, payment tied up in a foreign account while he was in the process of transitioning funds back to the States. He had said it quietly, without drama, and then changed the subject almost immediately. She had asked about it later because she was curious, and he said, "It's just bureaucratic nonsense. I've dealt with it before. It'll clear up." She believed him. Of course she believed him. There was no reason not to. But she had noticed, in that moment, a small and very quiet shift. The first time he had mentioned money at all, she thought nothing of it. By November, she had stopped thinking of him as a stranger. She thought about him in the morning before she got out of bed. She thought about him during slow stretches at work, replaying things he'd said, composing things she wanted to tell him. She had started telling her neighbor about him, carefully, without details, but still. She had mentioned him to her daughter, who had gone quiet on the phone in a way Patricia had decided to interpret as cautious optimism rather than concern. "I want to see you in real life," he told her one evening in early November. She had felt something move through her when she read that, something she didn't have a clean word for. "I'd like that," she wrote back. He said he was planning a trip. He said once the financial situation was resolved, the overseas account, the transfer, the bureaucratic delay, he would be able to travel without any complications. He said he wanted to come to her town specifically. He wanted to sit across a table from her. She started imagining it, what she would wear, whether she would be nervous, what the first moment of actually seeing him would feel like. She had not let herself imagine a future with another person in 4 years. He had given that back to her, that possibility, that sense that the second half of her life was not already determined. She had not yet considered what that feeling might cost. The first transfer was his idea, but she agreed to it quickly. This was late November. He explained the situation carefully. The account had cleared, mostly, but there was a processing fee he hadn't anticipated, a requirement from the bank to release the funds. It was $200. He was embarrassed to bring it up, he said. He had tried 2 other ways to handle it and both had fallen through because of documentation delays. He would reimburse her within days, he said. He was genuinely embarrassed to ask. "Please don't be embarrassed," she wrote. "It's $200. She transferred it through a wire service he directed her to. She watched the confirmation come through. She felt good doing it. Not because of the money, but because she was helping him. And helping him felt like a way of touching the thing that was building between them. She told herself, "This is nothing. This is what people do for each other." He thanked her with a tenderness that made her throat tight. The reimbursement never came. When she mentioned it gently, a week later, he apologized profusely. There had been another delay. The account had been flagged by the bank, routine, he said. Something that happened with international transfers. He was working to resolve it. He was horrified that she was even thinking about it. She told him not to worry. She meant it. There was something she didn't let herself look at directly. He had been planning to visit for 6 weeks now. Every time she asked about specific dates, something shifted. The account, the bank, a document that needed a signature from an institution overseas. Each complication was reasonable on its own. Each explanation made sense within the story he had built. But she had started to feel a low, persistent unease she couldn't name. She told herself it was anxiety, that she was scared of actually meeting him and her mind was creating obstacles. She told herself a lot of things. The second transfer was in early December. His explanation was more detailed this time. A legal fee required to finalize the release of the overseas funds. Something involving an inheritance from a client who had passed and left him a partial interest in a property. He needed $850 to proceed. He would have the funds entirely cleared by the new year. He promised. She transferred the $850. She sat at her kitchen table afterward and looked out the window for a while. She was 38,854 for down to 37,350 now, with the first transfer included. That was still safe. That was still a number that protected her. She told herself this. What she didn't tell herself was the thing that was already there. In the back of her mind, quiet and persistent. Why can't he find another way? She didn't ask that question out loud. Not yet. January came. He had not visited. The account, he'd explained, had encountered another complication, something to do with the foreign institution requiring a guarantor fee before releasing the funds. He was so close, he said. He was so sorry. He hated what this was doing to their plans. I think about you more than I should, he told her. Every day. I want this resolved so I can get on a plane. She was in her car in the parking lot of the dental office when she read that message. She sat there for a few minutes before going inside. The third transfer was $1,400. She justified it this way. She had already invested $1,050. Walking away now would mean losing that. And she wasn't just sending money, she was keeping the future alive. The trip, the table, the first moment of actually seeing him. She transferred the $1,400 from a different account, the one she thought of as more accessible, the money she used for actual expenses, not the deep savings. She told herself this distinction mattered. She did not tell her daughter. At 30% through the story, a detail she had dismissed was already there. She had asked him once, in the early weeks, why they hadn't tried a video call. He had a phone clearly. He messaged with photographs sometimes. He had said the connection at his place was unreliable, that he was dealing with an internet issue his provider hadn't resolved. She had accepted that. Now she thought about it differently. February was when the amounts changed. He called her, which he rarely did at that hour. It was late, just after 9, and his voice had a tightness to it she hadn't heard before. He explained quickly. The account was going to expire if a final release fee wasn't processed within 72 hours. He was going to lose everything, years of accumulated funds, the property, the ability to travel. He was devastated. He didn't know who else to call. "You made me feel alive again," he said. "I don't say that lightly. I'm so sorry to be calling you like this." She asked how much. He said $4,000. She was quiet for a moment. She had $36,300 left in savings. $4,000 would still leave her safe. Still leave her at a number she could live with. She thought about the table, the visit, what she would wear. She transferred the $4,000. She didn't sleep well that night, but she found reasons for that too. What happens when someone really wants to believe something is that they stop checking. Not because they're stupid, not because they're careless, because checking feels like a betrayal of the thing they want to be true, and they can't afford that loss. Patricia had not checked much. She had Googled his name once, early on, and found nothing that alarmed her. She had looked at his profile photos and found them convincing. She had trusted the weight of all those conversations, the details, the warmth, the consistency as evidence. But in late February, after a sleepless night, she sat down at her kitchen table with her laptop and spent 2 hours trying to verify a single thing. The bridge project he had mentioned. In Glasgow in 2019. She could not find it. She could not find his name attached to any project anywhere. She could not find his son in Portland. She could not find the company he said he had worked for. She sat with this for 3 days. She told herself there were explanations. And then she called him. "Are you really who you say you are?" She said it calmly. She had rehearsed it. He went quiet for a moment. Then he said gently, "Patricia, I know this has been hard. I know the delays have been so difficult. But I promise you, everything I've told you is true. I would not lie to you. Not after everything we've shared." His voice was even, patient, warm. "I love you," he said. "I don't say that to fill silence. I mean it." And she held the phone, and she wanted so badly for that to be true that she let it be true. She told herself, of course there are explanations. Of course things don't always have online records. Of course she was being paranoid, and if she acted on paranoia, she would lose something real. She apologized for asking. He told her there was nothing to apologize for. Hands on the table, pressing down flat. She had made the call. She was standing by the kitchen window and she had her hands pressing flat on the table because she needed to feel something solid. Her breathing had changed, shortened, without her deciding to change it. She didn't move for a long time. She had just transferred $8,500. The largest amount yet. He had called it a bridge payment. One final step, he had said. And the funds would release within 48 hours and he would send everything back double and book his flight the same day. She had done it. She was looking out the window at the same yard she had looked at for 22 years. The same fence, the same 2 oak trees, the same thin strip of sky. 38.4 had become 9.50. The account went quiet 2 days later. Not dramatically, not with a final message or an explanation. He simply stopped responding. A day passed, then 2. She sent messages that went unread. She called and it rang endlessly. She checked his profile on the app and found it had been deactivated. Just that, a deactivated profile. She sat with her phone for a long time. The 9 and 8 and 50 that remained felt both like a lot and like a different number. Not the number she had started with. Not the number that had taken decades to build. She ran the total in her head without meaning to. 200 plus 850 plus 194 plus 410 plus 800. $14,950. She had transferred it in 5 separate pieces. And each piece had felt survivable on its own. That was the design. She understood that now. She told her daughter a week later. The conversation was not what she had feared. Her daughter didn't say "how could you" or "why didn't you tell me." She just said "mom" in a voice that collapsed inward. And they stayed on the phone for a long time without talking much. She called a detective agency that investigated financial fraud. A quiet woman there told her gently that international wire transfers of this kind were almost never recoverable. She took notes on a legal pad in a handwriting she didn't quite recognize. She filed a report with the FTC, then with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. Then she called her bank. None of it came back. She continued going to work 3 days a week. She continued calling her daughter on Sundays. She sat with her neighbor on Saturdays and did not mention it. And then one Saturday she did. And her neighbor held her hand for a while, and that helped. The thing that took the longest to let go of was not the money. It was him. The version of him she had believed in. The man who had sent the photo of the dog named Ro. Who remembered that she preferred tea to coffee. Who said "I think about you more than I should" in a voice that felt like coming home. None of that had been real. And yet it had happened to her. She had felt it. And you can't unfeel something simply because the source was fraudulent. She still thinks about it sometimes. Late at night when the house is very quiet. Not with anger mostly, with a kind of slow, heavy wonder at how completely she had trusted what she wanted to be true. There's a reason this works so many times, on so many people, in so many towns. It doesn't require gullibility. It requires loneliness, which is different. Loneliness is something that can happen to anyone who has lost enough or waited long enough or simply lived long enough in a quiet house. The first transfer is never the point. The first transfer is the test. It's the opening of a door, not kicked open, but eased open so gently you don't feel the draft until the cold is already in the room. $200. That's what Patricia's future cost to begin unraveling. $200, less than a car repair, less than a dental visit, sent to a name she now knows never existed. If you think this could never happen to you, this is exactly how it begins. Not with a sudden scheme. Not with a villain who looks like a villain. With a message on a Tuesday evening. With someone who listened well. With a feeling, warm, specific, and real, that you were finally being seen again. That feeling is not a weakness. It is one of the most human things there is. But it can be used. Protect someone you love. Share this with them. If someone online has asked you to send money, any amount, for any reason, before you've met them in person, please stop and call someone you trust first. The National Elder Fraud Hotline, 1-833-FRAUD-11. Available Monday through Friday. The house is still quiet at night. She still makes tea in the same mug. Still watches the procedurals. Still goes to bed by 10. But she knows something now that she didn't know before. A piece of knowledge she wishes she hadn't had to pay for. There are people who are very good at finding the door that grief left open and walking through it like they were invited. She didn't know that. Now she does. $200. That was the beginning. When money goes wrong. Real stories. Calm clarity. Hard lessons.